It is October 14th, 2025, and reports say that Zelensky is headed back to the White House this Friday for a meeting with Trump, as you have Trump teasing the possibility of the U.S. sending long-range Tomahawk cruise missiles for Ukraine. But just how many Tomahawks does the U.S. actually have to send? And how much of all of this is about trying to provoke a response from Russia? We're going to get into all of that here in today's video. But before we do, Mr. Jax is here to say hi. He's here to let you know that if you enjoy these solo commentary videos and you want to see more of them, you can check them out right now by signing up as a paid subscriber over on my pages on Substack or Patreon. We have weekly deep dive episodes that we do there. And as always, I am grateful to have y'all here. I'm going to sit Mr. Jax down for his nap. I'm going to give him a treat first. And then let's get into all of the latest happening right now. All right, Jax is down for his nap. I've got my mini Dr. Pepper here. This is my favorite thing of all time. Not necessarily the mini one, but just Dr. Pepper in general. So I have my fuel and I am ready to go. All right, so I'm following the latest reports. I'm looking at what is being said. And of course, we've got these reports coming out today that Zelensky is headed back to the White House for another meeting with Trump. You've got Axios saying that Trump is expected to meet with Zelensky, according to two anonymous sources, and that the two will discuss what weapons should be supplied to Ukraine, specifically if the U.S. should provide game-changing long-range Tomahawk missiles to the war-torn country. And now we'll get into the question of whether these are really game-changing weapons here in a minute. But it's always interesting to me how the media frames this, because they do this every single time, right? Whether it's Abrams main battle tanks or it's F-16 fighter jets, they always act like this latest weapon on Zelensky's wish list is the big game changer. And of course, we have to go back to when Biden was in office, when this war really kicked off in 2022. And we have to remember the fact that Biden had even said at the time, we're not going to send Abrams tanks. We're not going to send F-16s or Tomahawks, because that would put the U.S. directly in this proxy war against Russia. He didn't say proxy war. I'm saying proxy war because that's what it is. But it's crazy how in less than 4 years, we have reached this point where the U.S. is directly involved. There is no denying it. There's no, trying to step around it and go, oh, well, the U.S. just they were supportive of the protest in Kiev in 2014. Of course they were supportive of the overthrow of the government in Kiev, well, because they didn't really like them in the first place, right? The U.S. always tries to play this game and act like they are not directly involved when at the same time they are very much directly involved. So now we have these reports that Trump and Zelensky are going to get together. I'm assuming it's going to be a more productive and a friendlier meeting than the one that we saw earlier this year, the first time that they got together. But as we're already seeing in the media, not everyone is playing the game of acting like the U.S. is going to provide Ukraine with all of these Tomahawks and they're going to be game changers for the war against Russia, because the Financial Times came out with quite the report in which they said that Trump will welcome his Ukrainian counterpart to Washington on Friday for talks about how they can force Russia's Vladimir Putin to the negotiating table, including through the possibility of supplying American-made Tomahawk missiles to Kiev. Now, this phrasing has already been a big part of the Trump administration, right? Forcing Russia to the negotiating table. We've seen it from people like Mike Waltz and Keith Kellogg. They say, oh, we just need to put the pressure on Russia. We just need to enact some more sanctions. We need to send more weapons to Ukraine. That'll do it. When Russia's been at the negotiating table this entire time. Russia has never turned down talks. Putin went to Alaska, for crying out loud. Did he give Trump what he wanted there? No, not in the sense that he didn't agree to a full ceasefire with no preconditions, which was what Trump was demanding, but he was at the negotiating table. So it's so comical to me that we still get these media reports and articles that claim that, oh, we just have to put a little bit more pressure on Russia. Meanwhile, Russia's over here like, hey, you guys do whatever you want to do, but these are our red lines. And this is just one of the ways we could respond, right? Talking about the Oreshnik and some of the talk that we've heard about that coming directly from Russia. The report from the Financial Times then goes on to say, however, the US would probably be able to supply only a few Tomahawks to Ukraine. This in light of the fact that out of the 200 the Pentagon has procured since 2022, it has already fired more than 120, according to defense experts. The Defense Department has requested funding for only 57 more Tomahawks in its 2026 budget. Y'all, they've only made 200 of these since 2022. This is sad, right? And I don't think that the US should be this massive war machine all around the world, but I'm looking at this and I'm going, okay, the US knows, right? It knows that it's in a proxy war against Russia, if not a direct war. It knows that it is, at the forefront of all of these different conflicts and wars all around the world. And it does not have the production capacity whatsoever. So while you have these reports claiming that, they're going to be this game changer, well, not really, unless it only takes 3 Tomahawks to bring Russia to their knees, which I don't think it's going to. But they act as though, we're going to send, whatever the ones we have left, and that they are somehow going to be some massive game-changing weapon, where from everything we have seen up until this point, that is simply not the case. The report then says that Stacie Pettyjohn, director of the defense program at the Center for a New American Security think tank, said that Washington could spare some 20 to 50 Tomahawks for Ukraine, which will not decisively shift the dynamics of the war. Now, that's one thing that I guess Stacie Pettyjohn and I can agree on, is that, the US can send 20 to 50 Tomahawks to Ukraine. It can make this big show out of it and act like, we're really putting the pressure on Russia. This is not going to do anything to change the state of the war on the battlefield. All this is going to do is just lead to the US, because we have to remember, it is not, the US sends the Tomahawks to Kiev and then Kiev carries out the attacks against Russia. No, it is the US carrying out the direct attacks against Russia. And as our friend of the show, Mark Sloboda, likes to say, maybe there's a Ukrainian in the room, right? Maybe you could claim that there's some Ukrainian involvement, but it has to be the Americans that are the ones carrying out these attacks because of the technology involved. So the US is in a position where, let's say that they say, okay, we're going to send 20 Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. Well, it's the US carrying out these attacks, and it also is doing nothing for Ukraine on the battlefield. It is not helping the manpower shortages that Ukraine is facing or the overall weapon shortages that they're facing. It's not helping them to hold the front line for longer or to push Russian forces back in any capacity. All that this is meant to do is to provoke a response from Russia, because as we've seen, especially over the last year, especially with Trump getting into office, Russia's been like, hey, you want to go to the negotiating table? Absolutely. Let's talk. But Russia's strategy has been to make it very clear to the US that there's a lot of things they also need to talk about. There's a lot of concerns they have to raise. So if we want to see some sort of a ceasefire, if we want to see a deal to end this war, well, Russia's got a few points that have to be heard. They have made it clear that they can't just agree to a ceasefire with no preconditions, because who's going to enforce it? And what is NATO going to be up to? Because all that NATO has shown Russia is that every time that there is any kind of ceasefire, they will use it to try to flood Ukraine with weapons. Or in this case, we could be looking at flooding Ukraine with European troops. So if that's the writing on the wall, those are the reports, those are what European politicians are saying that they're planning to do, then why would Russia agree to any sort of deal with NATO or any sort of ceasefire that gives NATO the chance to carry out this plan to then prepare for the next war against Russia? That's the thing that Russia has said. They've made it very clear that they don't want to just keep fighting this war every few years over and over again. Also, as for the conversation about Tomahawks, can we just take a moment to talk about the fact that each Tomahawk is estimated to cost $1.3 million? $1.3 million, that's insane. So if the US is sending 50 Tomahawks, let's just say that they come up with 50 Tomahawks, they're sending them off to Ukraine, $1.3 million each for each of these missiles. And they're not doing anything, right? They're not leading to any sort of victory for Ukraine. There is no winning this war for Kiev. It's really just a question of how long and how involved NATO wants to get, because Russia has made it clear that it's going to keep focusing on the battlefield, right? It's going to keep chipping away. This is a war of attrition. Their goal is the complete collapse of Kiev's military. That's what they're going to keep pushing for. And it's up to NATO how long they want to do this, how involved they want to get with what is a direct war against Russia. And so I know that as you're watching Trump make statements like what we heard from him on Sunday when he told reporters that, he may consider sending Tomahawks to Ukraine if Russia doesn't settle this war. He told reporters the Tomahawk is an incredible weapon, very offensive weapon, and honestly, Russia does not need that. He went on to say, I might tell them if the war is not settled that we may very well. We may not, but we may do it. I think it's appropriate to bring up. So Trump is clearly spending a little bit too much time listening to the Marco Rubios and the Keith Kellogg's of the world who are in his ear telling him, you got to threaten Russia, right? You got to threaten them with Tomahawks. Make it sound like we have more than we actually do, even though everyone knows we simply don't have the weapons. I would argue if we did, Joe Biden would have been doing everything that he could to send them. But how is Russia responding? Because I know that has really been a point of contention here. Because of course, when you had Biden in the White House, when it was his administration sending long-range missiles into Russia, well, you had Russia with a very strong warning. Now, of course, a lot of this was happening as Trump was winning the 2024 election. He was promising peace. And so Russia didn't want to get too involved in a direct response against the US, possibly targeting some US military bases in the region, and so on and so forth. But we heard from the Russian president last week. He argued that Kiev's forces would be unable to operate such a sophisticated system without the direct participation of American military personnel. He expressed confidence that in any event, the deliveries of American Tomahawk cruise missiles will not change the balance of power on the battlefield. He also cited earlier deliveries of long-range ATACMS missiles, which at first caused some damage, but in the end, Russia's air defense systems adapted. Now, I know there are people watching that are getting frustrated with Putin, right? They want to know why he hasn't had such severe warnings when it comes to Trump as some of the ones that we saw from Russia when it came to the Biden administration. And I'm very curious to see the way that his tactics are playing out here and what it could mean for a Russian response, right? He could be waiting to see what Trump signs off on, because obviously up until this point, we've watched Trump, right? Every time I have to get a ceasefire. Oh, Russia has to do this. Russia has to settle this war. Well, clearly there are no real teeth behind Trump's threats. He's putting them out there just to put them out there. But I am very curious to see how much Russia actually puts up with, because I know there's also an element where they look at the Trump administration and they're going, how far are these guys going to go, right? The Biden administration, you knew what to expect from them. That was something that Putin said during the course of the 2024 election. He was like, yeah, I'd actually prefer Biden because I know him. I know what to expect from him. Whereas with Trump, I don't even think Trump knows what to expect from himself. And yes, I say that even as I got a few of these comments yesterday on the video that I did talking about Trump's ceasefire plan for Gaza. And people weren't too happy with the fact that I was still being critical of Trump. They were acting like Trump had, I guess, solved the genocide and that everything was fixed. And maybe they're new here. Maybe they haven't been around. Maybe they haven't been paying attention to what Trump has been doing for not only this term, but the last one that he was in office. But if you follow what he says, he's all over the place. If you follow what he does, we're on the exact same track when it comes to Russia and Ukraine that we were on with Biden, just a little bit more delayed, right? We took a break from the long-range strikes and now we're right back to it. We're right back to this conversation and this question of how much Russia is going to put up with. Yes, we know they have the Oreshnik. We haven't watched them really put it to use yet. We know that they have weapons in their arsenal that they could really use to threaten the U.S. right back, to even carry out direct attacks in Ukraine. And we also know that while the Trump administration is putting the focus on the debate over Tomahawk missiles, right? Zelensky's upcoming visit. Look over here. This is the latest distraction. As all of that is happening, Russia's focusing on the battlefield, going back to the fact that this is a war of attrition and that they know that the US is not rolling out some kind of game changer that is going to affect the situation on the battlefield. It is just adding in another distraction that is going to further ramp up tensions between the US and Russia, because right now NATO is trying to provoke a response from Russia to further attempt to justify their increased involvement in this war. And that's something everyone should be talking about. If anything in this video resonated with you, be sure to like it, share it with your friends, leave a comment, and as always, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to keep up with all of my work, make sure that you're subscribed to my page on Substack. That's rachelblevins.substack.com. That's where you'll find ad-free videos and new weekly episodes of my exclusive series for paid subscribers called Sanctioned. You can also find Sanctioned over on my page on Patreon. That's patreon.com/rachelblevins. As always, thank you all so much for all of your support, and I'll see you next time.